Okay.
Okay, so now I moved one of the doughs out of the way, but this is basically nicely risen and soft. So what you want to do is press it down. Don't press the edges. You want them to stay slightly risen so you get a little edge around the edge of your pizza. And then you just kind of have to pick it up, and we're trying to stretch it out into a crust now. The edges usually are the hardest part to get stretched, so I start with that. Just go along stretching the little bits of edge. Then you can stretch the middle a bit. Try to tuck your fingers under the edges. Stretch it out. This is an art more than a science. You just have to get used to manipulating the dough. Stretch it out, lay it down. Again, stretch the edges out, particularly where they're thicker. You have to feel the thickness of the dough. The idea is to try to get it all as even as you can, so you'll get little slightly thinner spots. And thicker spots, you want to focus on the thick parts and try to stretch them out a little bit. And you can stretch out the middle, you can twirl it a little bit. Not necessary, but it looks cool, unless you drop it and then you look like an idiot. The problem is the spinning tends to stretch out the center where it's landing on your hands. And like I said, you also need to stretch out the edges, so you have to do more of this. At least in my experience, just the spinning only doesn't do it. And again, stretch out the thick parts in the center. Stay away from the really thin spots. See, we're getting a slight hole there. So we can seal that back up. Seal that little thin spot. Now let me get, what this is the pizza paddle with a piece of parchment paper. That's just to make it slide. In theory, you can do it without the parchment paper.
But
Just put the corn meal underneath it and just slide the whole thing off. But the parchment paper makes it a lot easier. Sometimes the damp dough sticks to the wood in one spot, and then you stretch your crust out and it flops onto the stone, and then you have a mess. And once you have put a soft pizza crust onto a hot stone wrong, it's very, very difficult to recover. So
parchment.
usually-
Oh, go ahead.
So you usually end up with lots of cursing and a ruined pizza, as Leslie can attest.
Yes.
Okay, so again, pull up the spots that got too thin. Stretch out the parts that are a little uneven, too thick. And the goal is to get a uniform crust that's about as big around as the pizza pedal is wide. So that's pretty good. Now we get the sauce. And again, this is the sauce for 2 pizzas, so put a fair amount out. You want to swirl it around. You want to try to get it out to the edges, but not overlapping onto the little rim. And in my experience, it's better to have it more out towards the edge because it all tends to sink into the center as you're cooking it. And if you put too much in the center to start with, then you end up with a puddle of sauce in the middle of your pizza. And put a little bit more. And the goal here is just to get it spread out nice and even without having too much focused in the center. Then I like to put a little bit of Parmesan cheese. I don't have any idea if this is traditional, but I like it, so I don't care. Then we get the mozzarella cheese. So this is whole milk, so it's low moisture. That's important. Fresh mozzarella makes pizza soup. It's got too much water in it. So you want low moisture, but whole milk gives you much better consistency in the cheese, in my opinion. Most of what you find in the stores is part skim. And when I used to use part skim mozzarella on pizzas, it always came out looking like plastic. It didn't melt right, it didn't brown correctly, and I did not like it until I discovered that there was such a thing as whole milk mozzarella, which I have never had a problem with. So I have not tried the part skim again in years, so maybe I'm biased, but I don't like it.
It is not hard to find whole milk mozzarella cheese. Again, that was a Kraft product that I just saw you. Sargento also makes a whole milk mozzarella in a package like that.
So this is just olive oil. So do two things here. First, I like a little bit of olive oil on the cheese, helps brown it, and then olive oil around the edge of the crust, and then I just turn it upside down to get the air out without blowing olive oil everywhere. So that is basically the finished pizza. Now, the cooking process. We have a 500-degree oven with a hot stone. Put the pizza on there for 5 minutes, and then we will show you what it looks like at that point. There's several more cooking steps, so it's not just 5 minutes and it's done, but we'll show you the whole thing.